Your gateway to East Africa. Your gateway to East Africa.
Most of the youth, they're unemployed because you rely so much on the theory part, you forget that after school there is employment.
The community have this concept of like, no, these jobs are not for you, this is not for you, you should do that, you're not doing this. So it's so hard for people to get exposed and do what they can just do for survival.
You might know something, she might know something, they might know something, but the way I deliver that thing, they are not the same.
Having the degree is not enough. You must be social, you must be charming, you must know diplomacy, you must have communication skills. I think that's what makes you stand out.
It could be giving money or stuff, but they don't want to do it because they feel like it's taking what they want. When something comes that takes you away, people, youth, we are young, yeah, we put the ignorance like, no, we cannot do that one.
Is it the problem of those people who are supposed to be employing me, or maybe it's my fault?
Your gateway to East Africa.
All right, thank you so much for making time. Thank you for choosing EAMG TV. It is another day, another time for us to be able to have another very interesting conversation. First of all, I want to say thank you for those who've joined our growing community across our digital platforms at EAMG TV. And if you're hearing this voice for the first time, if you're seeing me for the first time, you're wondering, who is this? As always, my name is Eugene Adangwe. Thank you so much for joining us. This is the Systems Audit, and of course this conversation today will be examining a very critical question that is shaping leadership across the continent of Africa, and I must say globally. Now, what are the questions we're going to ask ourselves today? One of them is, what systems must change for women to move from representation to real power? And of course, we'll be talking about what that real power does mean, because women today are increasingly represented across politics, business, academia, and governance. Yet participation has often not translated into structural influence and, of course, the power to set agendas, allocate resources, and shape institutional decisions. Listen, I'm going to share with you some statistics, and if you're talking from a global perspective, women do hold 26.9% of parliamentary seats. This is according to Interparliamentary Union, and this is data from 2024. Of course, we also know that women represent less than 10% of chief executive officers of Fortune 500 companies. We also know that women account to over 50% of university graduates globally, yet hold fewer than 1/3 of senior leadership positions, and this is according to the World Economic Forum. And so for us today, the question is not simply whether women are represented or present in institutions, but the deeper question is, do systems allow participation to translate into real influence? I know you could be saying, okay, those are global figures, but what about if we narrow down to the continent of Africa and come down right here in Rwanda? The country has a great number in terms of having the highest proportion of women in its parliament in the whole world. We're talking about having women holding 61% of parliamentary seats. And I must say, we did invite a representative from the Parliament of Rwanda. It was quite unfortunate we were not able to get that representation here in this particular studios. We'll be talking a bit about that. But we also know that women account to approximately 43% of businesses in the country, and this is according to the World Bank. So we'll be asking ourselves, even in high representation contexts, the questions continue to remain about who controls capital, institutions, and strategic decisions. Further away in Kenya, we also know that women hold about 23% of parliamentary seats. The country appointed its first female Chief Justice, that is Martha Koome. Yet the constitutional provisions requiring 2/3 gender representation in elective bodies still remain difficult to implement. I was in a great country called Nigeria just the other day. We had held there a nice roundtable on women leadership in the legal spaces. And it's quite interesting to understand that Nigeria represents the other extreme. Women there hold less than 4% of seats in national parliament. And of course, the country ranks among the lowest globally for women's political representation. Despite this, however, it's quite interesting that Nigerian women lead in entrepreneurship and business creation. And we want to understand if this is showing that economic influence and political power do not always align. We'll talk more about these numbers on the program. And so allow me to introduce my panelists who are joining us right here in the studio to be able to allow us to make more sense of this data. And of course, on this conversation, right here is Rebecca Hansen, transformational leadership coach. Rebecca, thank you so much for making time. It's been a long time coming, and I'm happy that you've been able to join us for this great conversation.
Thank you so much. I'm excited for it.
Thank you very much. Also joining us, we've had her in various lives and various spaces. It's Divine Avayo. She's a gender activist, and she also spent some time in front of classes lecturing on various issues, including human rights. And I want to say thank you so much, Divine, for joining us despite the cold.
It's always a pleasure.
Asante sana. Thank you very much. And all the way in Lagos, Nigeria, we have roped in a very good friend of EAMG TV, but also a good lawyer who's based in Nigeria, Judith Anuki. Thank you so much, Judith, for making time to join us on this conversation today. Right, and I want to start off right here in studio, by just getting a bit of reflection from my panelists who are joining us right here in studio. Rebecca, I know when I shared this topic, I got a few questions from those who I was trying to reach out to be able to invite them on the program. And when we talk about real power, going beyond just representation to real power, there are those who question and say, okay, who said women don't have real power? And so I want to understand, first of all, as we do one round of just understanding, what would real power look like or mean if we're talking about women, in the different positions of influence? What does real power mean?
Thank you so much. I would start by saying that this is a very complex issue. Mm-hmm. And as much as we can simplify for the context of this conversation, there are so many different layers and so many different perspectives to take into consideration. But one of the things that I find the most impactful is really the culture around not really considering women as being good decision makers. Mm-hmm. And this is not just here in Rwanda. We see it in many, many places that even when I was in corporate, I would very often find women in the director positions in departments that were not really taken quite as seriously. Mm-hmm. So and this is back in Denmark, I would very often see women in HR, in PR, in communications, in marketing, and then they would be allowed to monitor their own little space, but they would not really have real influence on the corporate, on the organization that we worked in. So their opinions were not really taken seriously. They were very easily interrupted or their decisions overridden. And for as long as we assume that women don't know how to make good decisions, it's going to be a problem for us to have proper influence. We're talking about power in a bigger context. I would say a lot of it has to do with, do you have influence over decision making? Do you have a say when it comes to making decisions in government, when it comes to making decisions in the organizations that we're looking at? Yeah. And so I love to look at the cultural perspective of it. Do we trust women? Do we consider them powerful as well, right? There's this incredible thing that has happened where we've managed to label womanhood and femininity as weakness, right? We look at women and we call them weak, which for me is insane when you think about it. I think if we asked an alien to come down to planet Earth and they had no cultural context, and we said, do you find this gender weak? I think they would say no, right? We have women making babies, childbirth, uplifting community. When they make decisions, it's very often something that's based on more people than just themselves, right? So women are very powerful, very capable, very strong in many different ways. But as long as there's this subconscious bias that makes us believe that women are not suited for leadership, they're not suited for decision making, and whenever we do put women in position of power, if they don't have real influence, it's not really going to matter.
Right.
But I think it's something that Rwanda has been really good at. We do see a lot of women in very influential roles, and that creates representation, which means that the generations coming after us have women to look up to. And then when there's communities that are telling them, well, you're not suited for leadership because you're a woman, they can say, oh, I don't disagree, because Diane Karusisi here, right? Or the ministers here, or all of these examples we have of great leadership.
Quite interesting. Divine, I want to hear your thoughts as well, because you sit in a country that we've had from the representation numbers, over 60% representation in parliament. How does that, or how has that, in your view, translated into real influence, real power?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think, first of all, we need to commend Rwanda for advancing gender equality, not just in the laws, but also in practice. The gender quotas has really translated into influence over time.
Yeah.
But talking about representation, it doesn't really necessarily translate into power per se. And I'm not saying that in Rwanda, the 60% representation in parliament does not necessarily translate into power, but representation is usually a starting point, but not an end point. So women might be in the decision-making but we also need to look back and see, does that representation really translate into influence or power that we're talking about? Representation, can get you into a room, but it doesn't necessarily guarantee you the position to decide what happens in the room. So I do believe that, of course, like Rebecca was saying, the younger generation, the generations that are coming, are no longer scared of taking up space because we have been represented. We have seen that it is possible to actually own the space and be in those positions. But also, we need to reevaluate and really see, do people in this position have the power to influence what happens behind the doors? Because most of the times we look at the parliament, we see they're voting for laws, for example, they're passing regulations and everything. But I would like to bring into a new perspective, maybe that we can talk about later, of how, you see, policies are not just, voted in parliament. There's lobbying, which is very informal. Men will meet at a bar and talk about these things, and the next morning, they'll come up in parliament and vote. Were the women there? So we need to reevaluate how women are positioned, and also maybe bring in another point of tokenism, where most of these gender quotas are enacted in the laws. It's mandatory that we have this number. The Rwandan constitution guarantees 30% of gender quotas in decision making, positions. That is untouchable, and then the rest comes after. So, but we also need to reevaluate if we're not doing that because the constitution guarantees that. Yes. We need to also look at the people that were these women that are being put in this position. What have they done? What have they done? Are they capable? Are they made ready to own the positions? Because there's a thought that always comes in. We have an already male-centered template, let me call it that. There's a system, a structured system that has been there for a very long time, for centuries even, if you want to call it that. And then we bring women and set them in that male template, which they do not fit into. It's a very structured system that has been there for a long time, which needs to be dismantled. But then we expect those women. I used to be one of those people who would bash, women parliamentarians. Like, why are they not speaking on behalf of women? Why are not they doing this and this, for example, to policies that are arising? But then you forget that they are also fitting into a male template which they have not been prepared to be into, which is, patriarchy is a bigger system. You can't just wake up and change everything. But again, like I started saying, representation matters, and it is the starting point. But again, not the end point.
It's not the end point. I like that. And we'll come back to interrogate those very heavy points that both of you have just made in this opening phase. And I want to bring in Judith here, because Judith, and I hope that the mic is now on from her end, because when we started, I could see she was speaking and we couldn't hear her voice. I hope that has been sorted. Judith, thank you so much. I want to ask you this, because you're in a country that the numbers are quite interesting. We spoke earlier on that women are holding less than 4% of seats in the national parliament. And the country is ranking among the lowest globally for women's political representation. Despite this, Nigerian women are leading in entrepreneurship and business creation. And this is sort of showing a very interesting statistic here, that economic influence and political power sometimes do not always go hand in hand. And we've always felt that we need leaders, women leaders in political spaces, for them to make political decisions that favor or support fellow women down here. Talk to me a bit about what you read in these numbers and what the actual situation is from where you are from as we speak today.
Okay, thank you very much, Eugene, for having me. So in Nigeria, we have there are women. Women are in the room, but largely not in control of the room. And the last speaker talked about the fact that we cannot deny the patriarchal positions, mostly in Nigeria, I mean in Africa, but mostly in Nigeria, it's so prevalent, even in the political scenes. For the Nigerian Bar Association, where I am a member, we have different committees that are being headed by women, but it's quite very difficult for you to have women at the very top level of being the national president and all. There have been quite a number of women who have shown interest, and counterparts do not only have support in terms of numbers, they also have sponsorship, right? So in Nigeria, while you have women who are being mentored, you have men who have actual sponsors because they want them there, because it is seen that their voices should be heard more than that of the women. Currently in Nigeria, we have the situation of a particular parliamentary Natasha. I was saying she came on board as a senator. Her voice has been silenced, and even recently she made a statement by saying society must unlearn norms that encourages women to accept blame and suppress their voices. So what happens in Nigeria is women's voices are suppressed. The patriarchal nature of our society is very pronounced in political sphere, and we're trying to change that. Yes, more and more women are coming out, but they are still not in control of the room.
Yeah. Thank you. I like what she just brings out, the aspect of being in the room but not being able to control the room. And I want to listen to what you two think about that, and what sort of systems shifts are allowing such to happen. Where is the system breaking? Where is the system failing women who actually have the ability to lead, to be able to influence? They are even in those positions of influence, but they are not, able to actually execute that. Rebecca, where's the system failing these women?
So I think there's an important thing to look at when it comes to the balance between systems and culture, because systems can only do so much, right? Systems will provide the structure. We will always be able to find little details where the systems can improve. For example, where are the rewards in the system, right? A lot of systems are depending on how are you rewarded. And if you reward people for, let's say, how many hours they put into work, let's use that as an example. then you're making it really hard for women who have home responsibilities, who have to pick up kids at a certain time, who have to do all of these things. It makes it incredibly hard for them to be rewarded for their work if they cannot show that they're also putting in the hours, right? So that's an example of looking at where does the system actually reward people. But now it also comes down to the culture, right? Do you have a lot of subconscious bias in unconscious bias in your culture that makes people believe that if you have a subconscious belief that women are inferior, it is incredibly hard for you to take decisions and influence from a woman seriously. And then you will subconsciously go in and you will override whatever decisions are being made. You're not going to take seriously what it is that she says. We see it in history, a lot of women who are creating inventions and making breakthroughs, and then they're being robbed of their achievements by someone else a man who comes in and takes over their work and then publishes it under his own name and then gets the credit. That can happen because they didn't take the findings seriously when the woman presented it. And so when we're talking about subconscious work, we're looking at how are people really having not even the conscious belief, but the subconscious beliefs that are really guiding our behaviors. If that is not taken into consideration, then the system is bound to fail, because there's really limits to what our system can do without also capturing the culture, the rewiring of society, right? We need much more awareness around what is happening here. We need to have much more calling out of what is going on when we see that the subconscious bias is taking over and overruling a lot of decision making from women. So that needs to be called out. We need to have way more conversations like these. We need to see what does it look like in practice, so we can correct it, right? The systems are great, and it's a great place to start. Like you said, it's a starting point, but it needs to follow through with how do we actually perceive women.
And the worry here is, like you heard from what Judith said, that there is even a woman leader who has shown ability, but the system has found its way of shutting her down and not allowing her to be able to execute her duties or even be able to thrive in her position of leadership. And this is where I'm going to bring you in, Divine. You mentioned earlier the patriarchal system, and you said it's not easy to dismantle the patriarchal system. It might take a very, very long time. But what must we do then today if we are to start dismantling the patriarchal system that shuts down women just because they're a woman?
I think for now, of course, the gender quotas, the systems that are being built are really necessary to dismantle, but we also have to look at the roots, and that's where usually I talk about kids that are growing up. Coming back to what Rebecca was talking about, you see, a woman will be put into position, but she has, I'll give you an example, a practical one. You see how when they invite women leaders for TV shows and, for example, an interview, they look at her and be like, so how are you navigating this and motherhood and being a good wife and everything? I've never seen a man who is a leader being asked how he navigates fatherhood and leadership. So most of the times women are considered emotional and everything, but also dismantling the patriarchy needs to come back to who we are as humans. Emotions are human, you see. But now coming back to the patriarchy, women are allowed to be emotional when growing up. I'll give a very practical example that I usually give to people to explain how the patriarchy works and gender norms and roles. That doesn't allow women to actually exercise or in the face of leadership and everything. If you have two toddlers, a boy and a girl, when one falls down, if it's a boy, we usually tell them, a big man like he's going to cry. Like, this is a 1-year-old that we're talking about. If it's a girl, we'll be like, pole, that like we say in Kinyarwanda, sorry. So we allow women to be human, actually. We allow them to show their emotions, to be hurt, to feel. But then when it comes to men, we teach them to be strong even in very unnecessary positions, like a toddler falling. They're hurt, they have a bruise, it's okay to cry as a toddler. Or even a grown-up man, it's what they're supposed to do. So if we raise kids like that, when they're stronger, one is emotionally intelligent and the other one is just surviving, let me call it that. So now we have placed women in a position where we have raised them to be emotional, but then we're also going to punish them for being emotional, where we start calling them weak and everything. And that is how society has conditioned them to be. And then we tend to go back and punish them for it. So I think what we need to do is starting from the roots, raising children. How should we raise children to be emotional but also independent and to be able to be to take decisions, to own spaces. If you see, maybe cultures are very different, but I think this is a global experience. Women are raised to be quiet, to be silent, to be modest, to be, and that also gets into the rooms they are taking. You see, a woman has been trained to be quiet, to be silent, to obey men counterparts. So when they're seated in parliament, that is how the women are going to be louder than the women. It's not that the women cannot, own those spaces, but that's how they're conditioned to be. And then when they're in those same positions, we expect them to, to perform as the same male counterparts, and disregarding that aspect of culture and how we raise women to be. That is, the cultural part of it, but also we need to look back into those systems and policies that are being put up in place. We say we need the gender quota, 30% that is guaranteed by the Constitution of Rwanda, for example. And that we get much into that, forgetting that these women also need to be competitive. You see how I like talking about equity.
Yes.
And most of the times people associate it with tokenism, but it's not. My kind of equity is where we train these women. We empower them to be able to take those same position and be able to compete or be on the same level with the male counterparts. Because men will always have an advantage, whether we want it or not. From the society conditioning, from the cultural conditioning, they'll always have an advantage. So we need to look back and see how we can, as much as we guarantee this 30%, these gender quotas to women to own the space, but also empower them to really leave the space and have influence in the spaces. Yes. Right.
So when they get to those positions, then you could still be able to feel a level of competitiveness in the kind of decisions and in the kind of way they lead when they take up those positions. I think this is what you're trying to say.
Yes.
All right. Judith, I want to bring you back and I want to understand, taking you back to the statement you made earlier on that, women are in the room, but they are not actually able to make these very strong decisions. And this is on the issue of representation versus influence. I'm not going to ask you why you feel participation does not always translate into decision making, or I'm not also going to ask you, why women remain visible but excluded from strategic decisions. But what I'm going to ask is, what do you think is the core reason why this has continued to be entertained in a world that is, transforming, changing? Why are we still in this kind of way of life in this time and age? What is the cause in your view? Okay.
I mean, several issues, several causes. My co-panelist who just spoke, she mentioned the home front, how girls are treated different from how men and children are treated. I would also want to mention religion. In Africa, and even this part of Africa, religion plays a very critical role. I attend a church where we have deacons and then deaconesses, right? But these deaconesses are just limited to what happens in the women ministry. I'm sorry to say, it's quite quite an issue. But you see, the deacons, these are people who are supposed to be in the same office and cadre. But the deacons are the decision makers of the entire church. So you don't have any deaconess, occupying that position. So, and even in Islam, you have that same situation. We also have that same barrier where women are relegated to the background. So I feel, if our religious leaders could, help out to, encourage women to come out to the fore. And I think it's going to go a long way. Also, I think largely women, governments encourage women to be mentored. And also women have little access to finance. There are women that offer, business loans, even in the informal sector. You don't have government agencies encouraging women to take big loans, empowering women economically. Women are always, relegated to small loans and all. So, but for the male counterparts, and even in the political scenes, you have the godfatherism kind of thing, where they get a godson. It's usually a godson, not a goddaughter, so to say. So, women, there has to be this shift from men mentorship to real sponsorship. And also religion. Our religious leader also have a role to play in strengthening women's active participation, both in the economic space and even in the political space.
Yeah, and it actually brings us to segues us very nicely to this other aspect of what we need to look at from that particular perspective. And I'm gonna ask this because sometimes we've had scenarios where the laws are there, and those who actually make it to these positions of influence not being able to fully advocate for some of these issues that face the women. And I must say, we've had reports where we know women-led entrepreneurs or entrepreneurial ventures getting quite less of funding compared to their male counterparts in that particular sense. And I want to understand, even from what Judith just mentioned there as I come into the studio now, what must shift, what must change if there's anything that has to transform the way of life and how things are at this particular point, in this particular sense. What do we need to do? Because we have all the indicators of what will actually happen if we transform this. Because if we close the gender employment gaps, if we close the access to capital gap, we're talking about over $20 trillion of global GDP. And you can imagine how that can be able to transform our economies and change lives in that particular sense. So probably Rebecca, and then we'll hear from Divine. What is it that we are not hearing? I'm talking about, when I say we, is those who have the power, the mandate to be able to fund, but then they end up funding more the male-led entrepreneurial ventures. What is it that they're not seeing? Probably we can start there.
Yeah, I think a very common thread that we're seeing in all of our answers really comes down to the conditioning and the programming of people. So it translates back to how do we feel and think about women, whether we're conscious of it or not. And I love that the point you brought up about even when we're kids, what are we teaching men to do and what are we teaching boys and girls to do? But there's also something that I heard someone say, I don't remember her name. She mentioned that boys are taught more not to be girls than they're taught to be men. Right? We grow up, don't be such a girl. Don't cry like a girl. Oh, you throw like a girl. So we're associating girls with something negative that the boys don't want to be. And they're taught a lot less about what does it look like to be a man, right? What is positive, healthy masculinity look like? So we really don't have that. And when we grow up being taught that being a girl is bad, you shouldn't want to be a girl, girls are weak, then that will subconsciously inform all of the decisions that we make. And that also includes how many girls percentage-wise are admitted into the schools, how many are getting the jobs, how many are getting the funding that you're mentioning. There's this really interesting study made once where they looked at the admission of women versus men at a musical school. So they would have auditions and they would play music, and then they would look at, okay, how many percentage-wise, how many women are accepted versus men. Then they did a second round where they made the judges not allowed to see whether it's a woman or a man who plays the instrument. And the percentage of women being admitted increased. And now finally they did another round where women weren't allowed to wear heels or jewelry that would be noisy or anything that could give a subconscious indication that it's a woman on stage. And again, the percentage increased. So we have this idea somewhere that because women get less of the jobs and less of the representation and less of the funding, it must mean that they're not equally good. But that's just not the case. The case is that subconsciously we have internalized that women are less capable, they're less good at leadership, which doesn't make any sense because a big part of leadership, managing people, is understanding people, which requires emotional intelligence, which, as you explained, women just are naturally grown into. So you will see very often that women are extremely capable leaders, especially when you start removing some of the limitations that has made them not take up space, not enforce decisions, not have the confidence. You have very, very capable leaders. And so I think when we're looking at something like the percentage of funding, I think a great place to start, like you said, is enforcing representation into the numbers. Saying that, okay, for these different grants that we have available, this funding that we have available, let's make sure that at a minimum, at least maybe 30%, like we're looking at in the Constitution, right? Are we going to mirror some of those numbers? Maybe at least 30% needs to go to women businesses. And a lot of people will say, no, we can't do that because that doesn't reflect what are they actually better or not. But we are just at a place right now where women who are equally good, if not better than men, will have less opportunity because of the subconscious bias that we're still dealing with. And so I think it would be a great place to start.
Right. Devin, is it unfair then for, women-led entrepreneur ventures or entrepreneurs, to be specific, would it be unfair if they felt those in positions of decision-making have failed them in advocating or pushing for this sort of system shifts, changes in how funding trickles down? And I ask this because I know that we, in this country, we have several women who are leading some of these ventures. We spoke about the Chief Executive Officer of Bank of Kigali. We have the Development Bank of Rwanda, the CEO is a woman. We have the Central Bank, the governor is a woman. But we still see women entrepreneurs still talking about access to finance being one of their biggest challenge compared even to their male counterparts. Would that young entrepreneur be unfair to say, I feel they have not really delivered for us in one way or another?
I do not believe it would be unfair because that's the reality on the ground. Most of the times when I'm having these conversations about power and representation in Rwanda, you'll see that yes, we do have women in power. The percentages are there. But I want us to go back to the village. Let's start sector. How many leaders of sectors, women, do we have? Of cells do we have? Let's go back to the Mudugudu committee, the village committee. How many women do we have? I attended once a village committee and they were literally begging women, like, can you please come because we need 3 women in this committee, because the tokenism that I was talking about. So most of the times it's not really because there is no women to lead or the women are not in power, but again, are these women empowered to even think that they're worthy of the positions? Because of that idea that men are leaders and everything, women, but of course in parliament we have educated women who knows that they deserve to be in the positions. But if we go back to where it starts, do women know that they deserve to be in these positions? Now, back to the entrepreneur positions. I think most of the institutions or systems that we have, yes, they will try to include women, and Rebecca touched on it in the beginning, but the positions are not strategic to give them the power to have influence over decisions. So you'll find out it's an institution, yes, but then you'll find women they don't have any influence over budgets. We're talking about allocating financial support to these young women entrepreneurs. I was having a conversation with my very good friend in the morning when I was telling her that I'm coming on the show, and then she was arguing. We're talking about gender gap. Pay in pay at workplaces, where you'll see that we're talking about how on women's day, companies will literally give cake or flowers to the women, like make them feel special. But I'm like, but when you look back, you will see positions that involves taking decisions and having influence. Women are not involved. When you look at salaries being paid in that same institutions, women are paid less. And then she's like, no, but don't we have women directors and everything? I'm like, yes, they'll probably make them director of HR, but when it comes to strategic positions where, for example, discussing about budget, there's a committee maybe allocating financial support to young entrepreneurs. And then we came back to the power of bargaining. Most of institutions, of course, we have the labor law, and we have a way of which is, of course, regulated by policies about salaries and everything. But you'll find out men stand out a chance when it comes to bargaining power more than women. You'll find a male counterpart in the same position earning bigger than you, because again, back to the cultural and society conditioning, men are supposed to be providers and everything. It's a young man, he'll need to build a house, he'll need to, to provide for a family. You're a woman, you will find a husband. Maybe the husband is poor, you also need the money. But men, like I was saying in the beginning, will always stand a chance. So now these women are being put in positions, in institutions, but they're not strategically positioned to make influence. You made maybe admin, HR, but then we have director of finance is a man, project manager is a man. You see, now, if you look at same friend, works in a very big organization that I won't mention the name. 80% of the staff of that organization are women, and it's a big organization, there are women. But if you look at the committees, those strategic positions that makes decision, 100% men.
But maybe you need to mention, because maybe it starts there, calling it out as it is.
No.
If you don't, then we'll never know, and then we'll never fix it.
I think that's a discussion for another day. But I'm conflict of interest. But point is, every time we think that, and mentioning the name is probably necessary, but this is how many organizations and institutions in Rwanda are structured. You'll find out they'll do everything to meet the gender quotas. We need 30% of women in this office. They'll even put on call for applications, women applicants are encouraged to apply. But then you'll find out those strategic positions that we need women to be into are not equitably distributed. So now that makes it very difficult for those opportunities. For example, let's say it's a financial institution, or those institutions, NGOs that are guaranteeing, for example, financial help and support to young people. If the men are the ones in the power decision making positions, they'll allocate it to the male counterparts. And by the way, when we talk about patriarchy and misogyny and everything, we tend to leave women from it. But I hate to break it to you that women are biggest enablers of patriarchy.
Boom. Mic drop.
Yeah.
Judith, you wanna contribute? Go ahead.
I mean, I don't know why I'd like to always take it from our own perspective, that women are the enablers of patriarchy. I once worked with a law firm where I believe the only partner, the only senior partner who should even have influence on how women are represented even in the firm, she only goes to court with a guy. And she said that's the person she's going to court with. She doesn't care about mentoring all the women. She said no, she's going to court with a guy because that's what she prefers. So, but I mean, I would want to also believe that change is coming. We should keep educating the society. I'd want to also propose starting from primary school level, secondary school, and even tertiary institutions. The education should begin. You know, in primary school, I think the time when Eugene came to Nigeria, someone pinpointed how that the definition of who a father is, you know, was made. He said the mother cooks the food. So those kind of stereotype definitions from, you know, the early stage affects children even while they are growing up. So yes, I mean, there should be shifts, there should be education. And yes, although quotas quotas do not fully solve the problems, but quotas should still be in place. There should be gender balance. And apart from the political space, it should also even go to our religious spaces. Our religious spaces in Nigeria. I just want to. I don't know why I'm really mentioning religion, because Africa is a very religious continent, and sometimes these things start even from there, you know. So.
Yeah, thank you, Judith, and this is actually segueing us into something I want to watch and listen to what this amazing lady had to say. It was out of a roundtable, a media roundtable, which East Africa Media Group, in conjunction with The Difference She Makes, organized in Nigeria. And she mentioned this very profound statement that I want us to watch, and then we'll be able to dissect that. The tech team, please, let's roll it.
As women, we tend to generally want to fade into the background. I'm just comfortable in my comfort zone. And so you will find out that is what is killing a lot of us in the profession. Just like it's been rightly said, there is no structural thing preventing a woman. As women, we tend to generally want to fade into the background. I'm just comfortable in my comfort zone. And so you will find out that is what is killing a lot of us in the profession. Just like it's been rightly said, there is no structural thing preventing a woman.
Yeah. She says there's no structural thing preventing the woman. It's actually the women themselves who want to fade into the background. In many cases, that is the context that she feels is holding women back from taking positions of leadership and influence. I want to read your thoughts on that. Where I've had even some scenarios where they say, we are our own enemies. We being the women. Women are their own enemies in that sense. Rebecca, do you agree? What are your thoughts?
With the transformational leadership coaching that I do, I always tell people that you're your own biggest problem, right? Because however you're being conditioned to hold yourself back is really what is creating the results that you have. And so I would say that there's an element to it, but I don't think it's that simple. If we look at, and we keep getting back to this, it's all about how we're programmed. It's all about how we're conditioned. If you look at a setting where you have a bunch of kids and then the son is hungry and then a parent says to the daughter, go fix your brother a sandwich. Because apparently the guy can't do that himself. right? So we're teaching young girls to serve men, and we're teaching men that they can be served by women. And we're teaching young women that maybe we're teaching that their opinions don't matter. You should, you know, only speak when you're spoken to, or don't think that you have too much influence on this. We're teaching women that their leadership is not important, it doesn't matter. And so when you grow up and you put yourself a bit like a wallflower, like she said, it is through many, many years of conditioning being taught you should not be heard. And until we start actually attacking that issue of how do we raise our kids, which is the thing that we're constantly coming back to, that is how it influences. And this is also one of the reasons that women are some of the strongest enforcers of patriarchy, because they have been taught you should be seen, not heard, so they will teach their daughters you should be seen, not heard. They will teach their daughters you need to go fix your brother a sandwich, because that is how they're conditioned. So until we start breaking down our own conditioning, we start challenging our own assumptions, and that we have to face the truth. A lot of women will probably have to go through the pain of realizing I've been holding myself back my whole life because of a belief that simply wasn't true. That is painful, right? And sometimes it's easier to just keep enforcing it. Actually, I'm going to stick up for these beliefs because it's easier than dealing with the pain of having to realize that I have wasted my life. I could have done something very, very differently.
Absolutely.
And this comes back to so many different areas. We were talking about negotiating salaries, right? If you have been taught to serve your whole life without compensation, it is incredibly hard to ask for compensation. If you've been taught that you should always serve other people without getting paid, it is incredibly hard to ask for payment. And this comes through in salary negotiations. It comes through in entrepreneurs that are pricing their products. Women have a lot harder time usually to price themselves with enough profit margin to create a sustainable future for their business. Because when you then have the son who's always the one, oh, but if ever I have to do something, I want to get paid, I want to get compensated. No, I don't have to make my own sandwich. No, I don't have to do all of these things without, what are you going to give me in return? And that is how we're creating a system around men who are very comfortable asking for compensation, men who are very comfortable saying, oh, but these women, they don't really have opinions, because they've also been taught that women's opinions aren't supposed to be heard or taken seriously, right? And it's like we kind of pat them on the head and say, oh, well done, yeah, okay, great for you, but no, we're going to go the other way. And until we get into the root of how we raise children, we're not going to be, she says that the structure and the systems don't hold women back. It depends on what structures and systems that you look at. Judith has brought up religion several times. Religion is a system that is keeping women second range, right? Because for some reason, we love talking about how women should submit to their husbands, but we don't bother going back a few verses that says husband and wife should submit to each other, right? We're cherry picking parts of the Bible so that we can condition women to believe that you must always serve. And the men are the ones with the purpose. And you should always support your husband. That is a structure that is keeping women away from wanting to be in leadership because they're taught that they don't belong there.
And then it's constantly repeated, and then it's passed down to next generations through upbringing. Divine, what did that statement make you feel? Do you agree?
I'm raged.
You're raged?
Yes, I apologize beforehand because that is what I was talking about. Women are enablers of patriarchy. She's seated in a room where she has space in front of very many men. I wasn't in the room, but from what I could see, it's a very highly male-dominated room. And she's talking about how women, that is a very, like how Gen Zs are calling it these days, a pick-me energy. You're lucky to be in the space because you've had the chance to to be educated about these things, to know exactly that, like you were saying, once you wake up and realize you've been holding yourself back, instead of teaching other women that, they could also wake up and know that they're holding themselves back, you're literally preaching to the men that, it's their fault, but it's not. It's a system. She's talking about how I'm going to be very criticizing this speech because she's talking about structure. If Rwanda did not make it a constitutional right for women to own spaces, women would not be owning spaces in the country. Let's go back to now I'm talking before the laws changed, and that is why we're talking about structures, because they can change and they can be policies that enables women to own the spaces. Let's go back to the law. A very simple example: in Rwanda we had a law where adultery is a crime even to up to now. But before, when a woman and a man committed adultery, a man could be punished from a month of imprisonment and a certain amount of money that I don't remember. But a woman could be given up to 6 months. Because apparently men are the providers, but they're forgetting that this woman is the one feeding the kids at home and everything. But the way roles are even compared and prioritized in like a simple matter as a crime, these two has committed the same crime, but they're punished differently. That is one example. Another example is when it comes to succession laws. In Rwanda, it's so recent. These are not things that have been in place for like 15 years back. It's so recent. Women could not inherit anything of their parents because apparently they have to marry in another family. Now this is showing how women are conditioned to marry, have children. What if that woman does not get married and everything? So there are very many structural barriers that hinders women to access those, the power that we're talking about. And representation, like I was saying, does not guarantee the power that we're talking about. You'll find out the women. I'll give you an example of late Immaculée. She's one of the most influential women in our country, who knew that she deserved the space and really owned it, and for what it looks like, she had power, and most of the women that are in position now were represented by her, and so that it could be possible. But look at how she was perceived in the society. You look at a video of her on the internet and people are calling her Igishega, or it's like a she-male in Kinyarwanda. So like most of the times these women are even going to take position, make influence, but we're still going to shame them for actually doing what they're supposed to, because women are not supposed to do that. And that is that the society conditioning and cultural conditioning. It's patriarchy, it's a system. That is a structure that was built for centuries and centuries that we can't necessarily ignore. Like Rebecca was saying, this is not as simple as it sounds. It's structures that were built for hundreds of years that we can't just wake up and say because a woman went to school for 10 years, she's now aware that she's supposed to, raise her voice. You'll see in discussions, like I was saying, sometimes I can be in class because some of my students are older than me. I could be in class and I'm saying something. Mind you, I'm a lecturer. I'm supposed to, to own the space because this is my space. But a male student will, want to silence you, forgetting that you hold the power in that same space. Now, don't get me started with male counterparts at work. You'll be passing an idea, someone will chip in like it's the most natural thing to say. Now, as a woman who is conditioned to obey, to be silent, I won't even say that my speech is not over yet. And most of the time I'll be punished for that, but that's how I'm conditioned. So that's a very structured system for a long time that we need to dismantle, that we cannot disregard. As much as we talk about gender equality, as much as we talk about women being in these spaces, that is the actual root cause of everything that we need to dismantle before we even attack capacities and capabilities of women, because those are built and we're not building them.
Quite interesting. Judith, you are in that room, and I believe that Baroness Mrs. Winfred was actually challenging fellow women and saying, look, we also have a role to play in all this conversation around access and accent to real power, that we also need to look back at ourselves and challenge ourselves to say, what role can we play? And most of the time, in her own words, she said it is the women themselves who actually fall back to the shadows and not actually push themselves, and there's nothing else stopping the women. I want to read your thoughts on that particular statement in regards to this conversation for today between real influence and what must be done for women to actually get those positions of power and lead influentially?
Thank you very much. So while she speaks on that based on her own evaluation, and I mean, I could say that can be true, maybe not 100%, but it is very true. I share in her sentiment as well. However, there's still work to be done. Most probably, when you're going to the top, that is political, going to levels in the political systems and even in government. An industrialist, one of the richest women in Nigeria, Folorunsho Alakija, she said something. She said, "I once dared to dream, and if I could succeed, then so you can." I mean, we've seen so many women in Africa who have succeeded. Even in Nigeria, Folorunsho Alakija, we have the Ibukun Awosika, we have Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, who is the head of international trade. Yes, so we've seen them succeed, and I mean, it gives us a ray of hope that yes, in some other quarters, there's still some form of biases, and even women having to shrink. Ibukun Awosika, what is success to Folorunsho, and what is success to Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala might not necessarily be success to Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan, whose voice, as is the attempt. So what is success for one woman might not be what is obtainable, what is success for another woman. I mean, Quentua, that's her name. She has been in rooms where she had to speak. Even in the NBA, I think I noted the fact that we have female NBA chairmen, but chairpersons. But for the national level, it's quite difficult to break that barrier. So yes, I believe that women should dare to succeed. Women should dare to break the glass ceilings. And yes, if you dare, you can succeed. However, we still need to create easy pathways for women to actually succeed.
Right.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, Divine?
Most of the times when we talk about power, we center it to these big positions of women ministers, women in parliament, and that is a very big point of it is coming from a point of privilege when we talk about successful women. But like I said, we need to go back to the roots, to those women who are not privileged to be in these big positions. And I do not believe that power in making influence is only in the political space. It could be at the market where this woman is selling tomatoes. It could be in the village where there's umuganda and opinions are supposed to be passed and everything. So I think we need to stop looking at this in the lenses of privilege or where we sit. I consider myself as a privileged woman because I am educated. I have access to finances, let me call it that. But there's a woman who could have equally the power without necessarily all those privileges, and that is the woman who I'm concerned about. There's a quote, overlords say that we're not equal. All of us are not equal until I'm not free until all of us are free. So the moment we start looking at this from the point of privilege, then we assess that every person has power and influence, but we need to stop going back to the people without privilege. Thank you.
And earlier on you spoke about the quotas, and I remember you mentioned that, and also Judith said we need those quotas, but can they be seen just as a temporary tool for change, or are they a permanent solution?
I think it's temporarily. Because I'll give a practical example here in Rwanda. If you look at how we built the education system and having women join educational institution, from that point of equity, where we're saying, okay, we recognize the struggles that women goes through, young girls goes through for them to access education, and how their performance cannot necessarily compete with men counterparts, because ABCD, we still had period poverty. It's still a thing, but at this point I could say that there's a change of narrative, and in solution we had girls who, before going to school, they have to first go get wood, prepare their brothers and everything. So that girl, you cannot say they're going to compete on the same level. If a woman has to miss 4 days in a month, of course I believe there are things that should be, structural. Women should even get days for their periods. But if you say that this kid cannot go to school because she doesn't have pads for 4 days in a month, if they have to be at school 3 months in a year, I mean, that's 9. And you count all those 9 months, there's 4 days that she misses school because of her periods. You're not going to say that she's going to compete when it comes to results on the same level as man. But there are structures that has been put, that room at high schools and primary for girls to change their pads or have access to pads. Those are a few things that were put in place. Even the change in mindset that we girls should go home, rest, prep like their male brothers, their brothers and everything. And we have seen a shift. Women going to school has increased, and that is why we don't have the same policy now. Now when it comes to results, women and men are considered the same, because some things has changed. So I think the quotas are necessary, because like I said, representation is a starting point, but like I said, it's also not the end point. So the gender still matters, because the patriarchy is still a system that we haven't managed to dismantle. And women are still facing issues when it comes to real power and having influence. So I believe it's still a tool that we need, and a space that women need to shine, and to have that awakening of the fact that they could achieve and own these spaces. But I also don't think it should be something permanent. I believe it's temporary, and when we achieve what we want to achieve, it's now if we're talking about equal rights and equal opportunities, then we can move from the quotas.
Yes. And I want us now to segue, and we're doing that really well, to the solutions. What do we do now? We've spoken about what's not working, where the system is failing. I want to understand now what must happen now, because I know that in many situations we've ended up seeing representation sometimes creating an illusion of power, without changing who actually is making the real or controlling the decisions. How do you ensure that we don't fall into that trap, or continue staying in that trap, that illusion that, if we have representation, it means they have the power? Like we said earlier, most of the times they could be in those roles, but they're actually not the ones making these big decisions. But the idea is we've made the society believe that we've given the women the power, yet they don't have the power. What must be done, Rebecca?
Well, I think we need to change a lot of the assumptions that we have, a lot of judgments that we have, and the only way to change that is to call it out, right? And I think social media is to some extent helping a little bit with that sometimes. That we look at what are typical behaviors, assumptions, judgments that we're making that are just simply false. We're having more research done. Women are included more into research. It wasn't until 1993 that in the US they made it mandatory for women to be included in health studies. Right? Until then, it was like, oh, but women are too difficult. Their hormones, we don't really know enough about them, so we just exclude them. Which meant that a lot of women ended up dying, right? It has meant that a lot of women's pain hasn't been taken seriously. I love that you brought up having days off for periods, right? I think if a lot of men, when we see that now with social media, we see men experiencing period pains through these electric shocks, and we see, okay, this is actually what we're getting a deeper understanding of what the woman experience is like. And the idea that, oh, women are just too weak to handle the pain is now being challenged. It's like, okay, it is actually really painful, so let's change the assumptions and the judgments that we're carrying to be based on what is actual reality. But we need to understand what are these judgments and assumptions that we're making, even when we don't realize it. And this is when we're coming back to the unconscious bias. I'm going to assume that what you had to say wasn't important, and then I feel like it's okay for me to interrupt you because subconsciously my opinion is valued higher because I'm a man, right? So we have to call out these types of behaviors. And that includes both the men starting to actually realize, how often am I interrupting these women? But they won't notice until someone says, I wasn't finished speaking. And that's the very unfortunate thing, is that a lot of these necessary changes are going to end up being in the hands of women, unfortunately, even though it shouldn't be, simply because we won't notice. It's the thing that we're talking about. You don't know you're privileged when you're privileged, because you have to experience the lack of privilege in order to even be able to point it out. So very often the people who are not privileged are the ones who have to bring up these conversations, who have to have the guts to speak out loud, who have to point it out when it is happening. So if we're saying, we need to challenge the decisions being made, right? If you keep making decisions according to what the men say, the women we need to challenge it. We need to call it out, because we're the only ones who truly see it, right? The people who are privileged, they don't see it, they don't experience it, and it becomes really, really hard to change what you can't see. And so we need to challenge it. We need to be able to call it out. We need to go against our conditioning and call it out when we're being interrupted. Right? Even though it's incredibly uncomfortable. It is incredibly uncomfortable to challenge authority and saying, I think you made the wrong decision. And I think you made the wrong decision because I'm a woman. And you just made the decision that helps men. But it also then needs to be possible for the men to be able to take this type of feedback without discarding it as being hysterical or dramatic, and without feeling some sort of emotionally triggered themselves, oh, you can't challenge me. I'm the authority, I'm the man, you're the woman, you should, because there's just so many little details and so many intricacies. But until we start seeing them, and until we start speaking them out loud, until we start pinpointing it, there's really not a lot that can be done, because we will just continue to fall into the same narrative. Right.
Perfect. I'm going to come to you, Devane, but let me ask Judith. In your view, Judith, what must we do if you're talking solutions from where you sit? If change is to really happen, and real change is to happen, where now women move from just representation to actually having real power, real influence, what are the two things in your view that must change now?
Okay, so mine is education, and it must start at the earliest stage. At primary school level, have symposiums, debates, and even debates amongst men, amongst boys, that talks about how important women leadership is, to expose them very early on the fact that women are quite very, very important in the society and should not be relegated to the background. The second thing I would want to change is that women should be in should have budget control roles. Just like the other speaker said, women should not be limited to HR roles, head of administration, but should have very critical roles in both the government, in parliament, and even in companies. And the truth is, if we would want to tell ourselves the truth, I'm a mother, I have 2 daughters and a son, and I noticed when I gave birth to them, I'm not comparing, but then what I saw in my daughters, because I gave birth to them first, was that they are quite strong. Women are very strong. You give birth to a girl child. Girl children are very, very strong. So I don't know what culture it is that lied to everyone that no, a male child is more important. Female children are very important, and that has to be emphasized. Women should be given budget control roles. If women could actually take care of the home front, they should be able to take care of the society, a company, the parliament, the government. So yes, education and then control
Thank
actual
you.
control.
Thank you, Jared. That's super powerful. Thank you very much. Divine, in your view, and you raised the issue of potential, off days or formal leave days for women during, the monthly periods. And this is what is bringing me to the question of those in position of policy influence, not literally having that power to implement such. And when I gave examples earlier of those in leadership positions today of some of the financial institutions, and then going back to the challenges women face when it comes to financial access to finance, is the same I would also put here. For example, in Rwanda, the Minister of Labor and Public Service is a woman. And would you be saying that there's a mismatch in there in thinking critically through some of these things? Or would you feel like their hands are tied? I know you would not be speaking for her. I'm hoping one day we'll have a chance to have her here and be able to understand if the expectations are just too much, especially where women say, you are a woman, you understand us better, you need to be able to influence policies and decisions that, talk to some of the issues we go through. Would you feel that there's that failure, that disconnect between representation and actual power to make these bold, big decisions that speak to the issues that women want handled?
Yes, I think it goes both ways. There is a mismatch, but there is also not, I wouldn't call it critically thinking about it, but being intentional about policies and solutions that we bring to match power and representation. Because some of these things you need to be aware. I'll give an example back to probably period pains that we're talking about. Women are taught to be strong, by the way. However much, when it comes to issues that they shouldn't even be strong about, they're taught to be resilient, so growing up we're taught to, women should go through pain when they're in periods. You'll find out most women, there's painkillers for periods, but you find out most women don't take it because growing up they're conditioned to understand that women should go through pain every month. So a person who does not understand that extreme pain for period, by the way, it's not normal for the viewers. Extreme period pain is not normal. There's diseases like endometriosis and PCOS and all that, which also affects hormones and emotions of women. But because there's less research about that, and people will go undiagnosed for years, women are just considered to be emotional like that, but we don't tend to look at factors behind that. So it's not that, of course, there's a mismatch. There's that woman minister who is minister, but ministers does not make decision. I mean, power is not personal at the end of the day. It can't be narrowed to one person. It's a collective, issue when it comes to, of course, policies, when it comes to these big positions of power. So we can't narrow it down. Like I said, I used to be one of those people who blame women for not, bringing tangible change because they're in position. But we tend to forget that it's a collective issue now, that it's not just this woman who is in power, but also how the team that she's working with understand and how they are making it intentional to bring solutions. So that brings me back to those strategic positions. So minister cannot solely pass the budget, for example. It's a committee that is in charge, so she could be outnumbered. I'm not necessarily excusing women not bringing change, but change is not, it's not a personal responsibility. I'm just saying it as a collective. So we need to look at both sides and being intentional. So as much as this person could be intentional, they could also be outnumbered. Like I was saying, you find out these strategic positions are occupied by men. So most of the times, for what I've seen, women are outnumbered. They might be very many, but like I said, representation does not translate into power. You're many, but the strategic positions that allows you to have power are also occupied by people who does not want to, to allow the other people to have power. So I would also call out, like, let's stop blaming women, but let us blame the system, because a woman will be taken into power. You're celebrating that, this woman has been voted into or appointed into this position.
Yeah.
But then the expectation could, like you were saying, could also be too much. Because as much as this person is in this position does not really influence what happens after. You could sign the policies, you could sign the budgets, but how much influence does this person have over this budget if she doesn't have a collective of people in the strategic positions to to support it?
Yeah. So what do we do? What do we do, Divine?
Back. They've talked about calling it out. They've talked about education. Talking about the structural change, the intentionality that comes with, putting women in this position. Let's stop ticking boxes, because most of the times you'll find out it's not just Rwanda but other countries, because we have to achieve the gender, equality index in 2050 and all that. We need to fill this and this and this. So we tend to be ticking boxes but not really being intentional about distributing power between men and women. So we need to go back and really be intentional about it. How many women do we have in this strategic position? How many women are we really sponsoring to be able to take over these positions? So let's leave the surface level of doing things, but really being intentional about it and really making sure that these women are in power, yes, and they look like they're in power, but do they really own the power to make real change? So, like, let's stop ticking the boxes.
Let's not just tick the boxes. Ladies, thank you very much, including Judith, who joined us all the way from Lagos, Nigeria, and of course our technical team that made this also possible, and to you who's been watching and who's been following religiously. I know we spoke about religion in this particular show, but now in the context of loving this show and following it religiously, we want to say thank you for being a part of this particular program. If you love such kind of conversations, we want to invite you to subscribe to our YouTube channel at EAMG TV. You can also follow us across other digital platforms at EAMG TV. As always, my name is Eugene Anangwe. Goodbye for now. We'll see you next time, same place. Adios.
Gateway to East Africa.
Africa doesn't have time. We don't have time to waste. We're going to be 60% of the world's youth by 2050. All of these are alarm bells.
AI will be like your coding partner. AI will be like the next companion for you to work with.
If you want to build a capable workforce, digital literacy is a must.
We have to look at changes around regulation, digital transformation, and one of the most important things is about talent retention. We need to be able to keep those jobs here.
Have faith in yourself, have faith in your ability, and take that first step because you will not regret it.
We believe young people are not only participants, but they are agents of change.
You're taking some pictures and you're going to be saying before and after.
In Rwanda, Kazakhstan relations